Hey everybody, I'm Dwayne Laughlin. This video is prepared in particular for my friends in the Clive Cussler Collector Society. I attended our recent convention in Las Vegas, had a fabulous time, and I was especially pleased with the presentations that were part of the schedule. They were wonderfully educational, wonderfully entertaining, and extremely well done. When I arrived home, it occurred to me that now it'll be another year before I get to see such presentations again. You know, bummer. I enjoyed them. I do plan to be at the conference next year, but that's a long wait. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and make a presentation of my own, and that's what's happening here. I have absolutely no agenda in this other than I thought it would be fun to prepare it, and I thought it might be fun for some of you to watch. When I was at the convention, I discovered that there were quite a few out there that had an experience similar to mine, and that is before they became aware of Dirk Pitt, they were fans of Doc Savage. So this is titled From Doc to Dirk. I discovered the joy of reading novels when I was in the 7th grade. We had a scholastic book club that was part of our school system in those days. We would get these little flyers and there would be books on them that we could purchase. And we would give the teacher our money, she would send away the order, the books would come back in a couple weeks. Well, I still remember the day that on the flyer I saw the title Tarzan of the Apes and this picture of a man on a tree limb with a knife. I loved the Tarzan movies with Johnny Weissmuller and the other actors too, but especially Johnny Weissmuller. And I thought, well, as much as I like the Tarzan movies, maybe I would enjoy reading the Tarzan book. The book came, I began to read it, and I couldn't put it down. And this may not be the same experience that would go for all 7th graders, but it really, I was a good reader, and it just pulled me into a wonderful world, and I became almost addicted to reading stories from then on out. I would purchase every book on Tarzan, every one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books that I possibly could. A day came when I was with my mother in a drugstore, and this was the time in our culture when Walmarts didn't exist and big box stores didn't exist, and drugstores had a whole lot of other things besides your prescription. And I saw a book rack, and on this book rack there was a picture of this very muscular man with a torn shirt, and the book title was Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze. I had no idea what that was about, but I had to read that book. So I had enough money to purchase it. If I remember right, it was only like 45 cents. Unbelievable, they were so cheap in those days. But anyway, I purchased the book. I'm not sure my mom approved. I kind of got it purchased before she knew I did it. And I think she was worried about, what's my son going to be reading? She didn't know, I didn't know. But I got home, I got into that book, I read the whole thing in an afternoon, and from then on, I wanted to read every Doc Savage story I could find. My job in those days was mowing lawns. For the next 2 years, I spent every dime I made mowing lawns, ordering books. I went through the Tarzan series, John Carter of Mars, Pellucidar, the Edgar Rice Burroughs stories, but when it came to Doc Savage, he was my guy. And I got every one of his books I possibly could. Well, after that, life happened, and as it does for all of us, we get busy with other things. I graduated from high school, we started a family, I had my career, and I would say for the next 4 decades, close to 4 decades, I didn't read novels. I only read books that would educate me. Books are related to my career, books are related to business techniques, related to money management, things like that. And life went on, and that was where my attention was. But my career became fairly well established. I was a professional entertainer. I did big magic shows. We worked on 5 continents and crossed America many, many times, driving our truck, pulling the show. And those drives got boring, and I was at a place in my career where I really didn't need to keep feeding my mind with new things. So I started listening to books on tape and novels. And I found it was a good way to pass the time driving. And I still remember the night we were driving across northern Nebraska, and it was a boring night, and I was fighting to stay awake. And I stopped at a truck stop, and I found a book called Sahara by this guy. His name was Clive Cussler. I had no idea who Clive was or what the book would be about, and it was only 3 hours long. It's a travesty to those of us who are collectors to think they did that to the book, but they had abridged it to 3 hours. So I started driving, started listening to it, and I had no trouble staying awake. It took me into a wonderful world. I really enjoyed the story, and I found myself thinking, I'm missing a lot. This is a good book. I need to know more about it. So I found a library where I could borrow books on tape. I found the book Sahara, full length, listened to it, then I listened to Inca Gold, and from there on I was hooked. Me and Clive Cussler, we spent a lot of times on the road together by way of audiobooks, and I worked my way through every one of his stories that I could. So that's where the connection starts for me. But what happened, especially at the recent conference, when I was talking to people who knew about Doc Savage, and of course they're great fans of Dirk Pitt, I got to thinking that there are some similarities. And beyond that, I began to wonder, why is it that when I found the Dirk Pitt books, I got the same feeling I got in the 7th and 8th grade when I found Doc Savage. Really, truly. Even though so many years had gone by, it was like that same feeling I had back as a kid when I first discovered my joy of novels. And it's like, well, why is the same feeling coming again? And that led me to think that there are some similarities. Now, I believe they're two very different heroes, Doc Savage and Dirk Pitt. I've heard some people say that Dirk Pitt is a reincarnation of Doc Savage, and I do not believe that at all. Clive definitely came up with his own original idea with Dirk. But even so, there is what you might say some commonalities. And I see three things in particular that, at least for me, I think are really important. Number one, both Doc Savage and Dirk Pitt are strong, stable, good guy heroes. There's a current school of thought that says if you're going to have a good protagonist in a book, he has to be a messed up individual. He's got to have problems. If he doesn't have problems, people can't relate. You know, he's got to be coming off a broken marriage or trying to recover from alcoholism. This man has his addictions. He has his personal demons. You know, he has all these things going on in his life that he's really struggling with. And they say you've got to have a character like that. Well, I disagree. And to the benefit of many of us, Clive Cussler disagreed, as well as did Lester Dent back when he came up with Doc Savage. Doc Savage and Dirk Pitt are both stable, solid individuals who don't have personal demons of their own. And because they don't have personal demons of their own, they can go out and fight everybody else's demon. You know, it's this idea of here's some guys who've got it together. And because they've got it together in life, they're going to go out and do all the good they can for others. And, you know, along the good guy theme, I also love the fact, and I think it's somewhat unique with Clive Cussler, in that Dirk is a guy who loves his wife. He's not a crazy womanizer, that sort of thing. And I just think all of that puts together, it just creates this kind of hero that I want my hero to be. Now, those of you who are fans of Doc Savage, you will know that toward the end of the Doc Savage stories, when we get to the late 1930s and moving on into the next decade, those who picked up the writing of the story started trying to give Doc personal problems, thinking that would make him relate better to the society that was modern at that time. And of course, that led to the demise of the Doc Savage story. It just didn't work. So anyway, I'm trying to keep this relatively short, but I just love the fact that we've got some strong, solid, stable heroes that can focus on doing good for others with the gifts and the fact that they basically have life going well. So the second key thing, and that is both Doc Savage and Dirk Pitt provide a combination of action and intelligence. It's not just about fistfights and gun battles. There are all kinds of other interesting things, inventions, machines, gadgets, scientific experiments. With Doc Savage, submarines, airplanes, radio waves, and even automatic pistols. For the time those books were written, those things had recently been science fiction. It's not all that long that they were like reality. And many a reader would read about those things and wonder, do those things exist? And I think if they did the research to discover those things did exist, they would marvel. And I know as a young man, I was just fascinated to read about something happening with an airship or an underwater scene or whatever it might be. Well, obviously, Clive Cussler did the same thing with Dirk Pitt. When we come to Dirk, basically we are discovering things that many times are on the cutting edge of technology. It's a combination of fiction and and imagination, but in the midst of it, we've got these submersible vehicles, we've got these fantastic gadgets, we've got different experiments going on, unique aircraft, and I will hear these things as I listen to the books and think to myself, does that really exist? And then I'll do some research and discover, wowee, it does exist, or it did exist. You know, at the conference we talked about the tri-motor plane, things like that. I didn't know about it until I read a Clive Cussler book. So what we discover is that Clive really did his research. And many of these fantastic things he wrote about at least had their origin in something that really existed, and some of the things he took true, a factual aspect of history, and he put it into the Dirk Pitt story. So the whole idea here, trying to put it in a nutshell, is that the books are not just mindless action. They are great adventures, and there's some substance to them. Going back to Clive's books, the prologues, and this historical things that he weaves in. And we know it's a mix of facts and fiction, but he'll have something there and I'll go, I didn't know those people ever made it to America, that ancient culture. I wonder if that's true. I'll look it up. Sure enough, it's true. And so you might say, that intellectually, these books appeal to us as well as appealing on the gut level. And thirdly, both Doc Savage and Dirk Pitt, both of their books are basically all about the joy of the story. I never had the privilege of meeting Clive Cussler in person, but I have watched him on video and I have tried to read as much about him as I can. And one of the things that I think is really critical to understanding his books and their appeal is Clive said openly, I write to entertain. He didn't have aspirations of being, numbered among the great literary giants of all time or anything like that. He just wanted to write wonderful stories that people would have a wonderful time reading. And Lester Dent, who created the Doc Savage stories, was in that same mindset. He was not trying to create literary masterpieces. He was trying to create stories that people just absolutely love to read. And I think that's very, very significant. I think there's great value in the whole idea of just doing something because you want people to, you might say, be blessed by it. I love this attitude, when it comes to the stories, and that I sense in Clive's writing, where he's happy to go over the top with some of his descriptions. And even though, as I mentioned earlier, he's got science and he's done his research, very intelligent, but he also liked to move into this realm of what if, and wouldn't it be cool if that would happen? Or wouldn't it be cool if that could happen? And then he go ahead and writes it as if it did happen, so the rest of us can go, wouldn't it be cool if that happened? Wouldn't it be cool if something like that occurred? So what he does is he provides us with something that is just genuinely entertaining to read. Well, I didn't prepare this to be anything profound. As I said at the start, it's just supposed to be fun. So I'm going to wrap it up. And essentially, all I've tried to do here is say that, I want to make a little tribute and express my gratitude to something Lester Dent did for me when I was a youngster. And Clive Cussler does for me now. And a quick comment that when I go back to the Doc Savage books, I'm amazed at how juvenile they seem. I think if I first discovered them at this stage in life, I wouldn't be so interested. But for that time in my life, they were fantastic. Now I enjoy them from a nostalgia stake. But with Clive Cussler, he wrote something for a guy at my stage in life, with whatever maturity I possess or don't possess. He wrote stories I can enjoy. So anyway, I say thank you to Lester Dent, and then later thank you to Clive Cussler for Doc Savage and Dirk Pitt, where we have good guy heroes who aren't fighting their own demons. Instead, they are free, liberated to fight the demons of others. And I want that kind of hero. I do believe good guys still exist. I do believe there are people in this world who basically do have it together and want to do good things with that. And then second, I'm pleased that they add some intelligence, they add some good research to their stories, so I learn a little bit along with having so much fun. And finally, I say thank you to both of the writers and to those characters for providing the joy of the story. I read Clive Cussler books just because they're so much fun to read. They're a great way to pass the time when I'm working out, walking, whatever it is, if I'm listening on audio. And they just add something special to my life in forms of entertainment. So that's all I have to say. I don't want to repeat myself. I hope you enjoy watching this at least a little bit. I certainly had fun putting it together. So again, I'm Dwayne Laughlin. That's all I need to say about this from now. From Doc to Dirk, from my friends in the Clive Cussler Collectors Society.